Howdy, this is the Views from the Shop podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller, and today it is Friday, May 15th, 2026, and I wish you a very, very, very happy walk safely to school day. On today's show, a lot of news to recap from the week that was in Ohio State basketball. The Buckeyes received their Big Ten opponents and locations. Not technically a schedule, but we know who Ohio State will play, how many times, and where those games will take place in the Big Ten. Some saying it's the hardest schedule in all of the Big Ten Conference. I have a take, and I will give that on today's show. We'll also talk about Jake Diedler adding to his coaching staff. He's filled out the coaching staff, replacing Joel Justus. We will talk about that. And then a couple other topics that may get addressed, may not. You'll have to find out here on today's show. We'll see how we pace today. So, this is the only Ohio State basketball exclusive podcast publishing Buckeye basketball content year-round, at least once per week during the offseason. So, if you consider yourself a big-time, a die-hard, or just a casual fan of Ohio State basketball, you've got to make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Like the video on YouTube. Make sure that you tell YouTube, hey, I want more of this content, so that it brings it to you whenever there's a new show. Helps out the show a bunch. Give a 5-star review as well, wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, you can follow on all the socials. And get the Substack, Views from the Shop podcast.substack.com. Sign up for completely free. Push notifications to your phone, emails, whenever anything new happens with Ohio State basketball. That's the place to be on that. Plus, you get into the chat, get insider scoops, intel, and a whole bunch more there. News before it happens. Maybe that happened a time or two this week. Make sure you're there as well in the chat if you'd like to increase your access and unlock insider intel on Ohio State basketball. First thing to cover today, the Ohio State University basketball team received its teams, opponents, locations that the Buckeyes will play in the Big Ten Conference. There are people saying this is the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. I've got a take on it, first of all. So first, let's knock this out together, folks. Here is the Ohio State basketball Big Ten opponent splits home, road, and a couple teams they will double up against. At home, they've got Maryland, Michigan State, Northwestern, Oregon, Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Washington. They will travel to this year. Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Northwestern. Hold up. Nebraska. It's hard, okay? Nebraska and Northwestern's logos very similar. So they're going to travel to Nebraska, Purdue, UCLA, and USC, and then they double up against three teams as per usual. The first, of course, we know, Michigan. We think that's going to be normal moving forward, taking on a rival there at home and on the road in Ann Arbor. They also double up against Iowa and Penn State. If you're like me, as you saw this first come out, you probably instantly went to the home and away, the double up. Will Ohio State play Michigan again 2 times this year, like it is now starting to see moving forward? The Big Ten allowing these rivalry games to be played twice. That's the first thing we saw. That's the first thing we got. Ohio State and Jake Diedler will take on Michigan 2 times this year. The defending champs, they see that Block M on their schedule 2 times this year. That's the first thing that I personally look at. Then from there, you start to go to, what are the other double-up games? Who else will Ohio State play twice? We know Iowa, a team that made a huge push and run in the NCAA tournament this year. Of course, until Iowa lost in the NCAA tournament, the last team to beat those Hawkeyes were the Ohio State Buckeyes in the Big Ten tournament. We remember that. Who couldn't? So Iowa, don't love playing Iowa twice. It's going to be a pretty good team again next year, will the Hawkeyes. And then you get Penn State. I think you can look up at all 18 teams across the Big Ten Conference, and at this point, you're probably saying Penn State, worst program, Penn State, worst team, Penn State, just not a team that you're going to be all that frightened by seeing it on the schedule. That's not to say Ohio State hasn't been tripped up by Penn State in recent years, especially under that Chris Holtmann team. The last Chris Holtmann year, I believe it was, where Ohio State got up by 18, I think, on Penn State. Still ended up losing that game. That was a fun show, I'm sure, after that game. But Ohio State gets, well, defending champs in Michigan, expected to be a Final Four team again this upcoming year, at least a strong contender for one of the top teams in the nation. Iowa expected to be pretty good again this year. Penn State, not a team that you really fear all that much. So you look at the double up, and then what I personally do from there, I want to figure out where Ohio State is going. Where are the Buckeyes traveling to? And you see it. Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota. Okay, yeah, sure. Nebraska, Purdue. When you head out west, you're going to go take on UCLA and USC most likely in a back-to-back fashion. In that regard, this is tough, okay? For me personally, as I want to figure out what's good, what's bad for Ohio State, these away games, these are going to be really, really tough. 9 teams from the Big Ten made the NCAA tournament last year in men's basketball, okay? Of those 9, Ohio State travels to 4 of them. That would be Illinois, that would be Purdue, that would be UCLA, and that would be Nebraska. Those are the 4 they travel to. Plus, on top of that, they play 2 other teams twice. So not just once, but twice. So Iowa and Michigan included there. But specifically looking at that road schedule, my personal preference would be let the tougher games be at home. Let the road games be a little bit easier. I mean, you just look at last year, resume metrics right now for Ohio State. That game that Ohio State won against Northwestern at Northwestern in December consistently was kind of flirting quad 1, quad 2, but it was not a good win. No one looks back at that win and says, man, good. I mean, you look at Ohio State's resume, and that Northwestern win's really carrying for Ohio State. No, that's not the case. The win over Purdue at home, that was huge. The win against Wisconsin at home was huge. But remember, Northwestern flirted with top 75 status in the net rankings. So Ohio State had that win because it came on the road. It flirted with quad 1, quad 2 territory. Whereas Ohio State got that big win over Wisconsin in late February. And that was a team that Wisconsin, you were hoping they were 37th and they were 36th, 33rd. Can they get to top 30 status so it could be a quad 1 win? Everyone and their brother knows that home win over Wisconsin, far more impressive than the away win over Northwestern. But resume metrics wise, the win over Northwestern ended up being better for most of the year than a win over Wisconsin, because that win over Wisconsin came at home. So that said, I would like my easier games to be away. There's a better chance you win those games, and it looks better for you if you beat a bottom of the barrel-ish type team. For example, Penn State this upcoming year. If you beat them, there's a chance it could mean more winning that game on the road than it does beating Iowa at home, for example. So because of that, I would like to see the away games be a little bit easier for Ohio State. That's simply not the case. On top of all the previous March teams that you're going to play, and I get it, it was last year. These are all different teams. Some teams are going to be better. Some teams are going to be worse than they were last year. But if you make the NCAA tournament, you're most likely not going to fall off a cliff. So because of that, you look at the fact that of the March teams that you have to play, there's that. On top of that, Ohio State has to go to USC, currently the number 3 portal class according to On3. Number 3 portal class in the nation, not in the Big Ten, number 3 in the nation. They've got to go to Indiana, that's the number 7 portal class in the nation according to On3, and UCLA, the number 9 portal class in the nation according to On3. So on top of having to play the top 3 portal classes in the Big Ten, in Indiana, USC, and UCLA, obviously you have to play all of them. You have to play all of them on the road as well. Then you look at the home games for Ohio State. This is where, if you were a fan of Ohio State, you probably look and see, all right, which of these games am I going to line up? I got to get schedules to get right here so I can get to a game or two in Columbus, or maybe several games in Columbus. The headliner will be Michigan State. I wouldn't guarantee it, but I would say there's a high likelihood that Ohio State against Michigan State game is probably CBS, 1 o'clock after the Super Bowl. Not obviously not after the day of the Super Bowl. Well, it could be the day of the Super Bowl, actually. The day of the Super Bowl or later in the year. That would be my guess. It also could be one of those Fox Friday night games. There's potential for that as well. But the headlining game at home for Ohio State this year will be against Michigan State. From there, you're going to have to be really, really good at home because, unfortunately, home wins just don't mean as much as road wins. I explained the difference between that Northwestern win on the road compared to the Wisconsin win at home last year. Of Maryland, Michigan State, Northwestern, Oregon, Rutgers, Washington, and Wisconsin, you probably need to win 5 of those would be my guess. Now, I could easily see wins over Northwestern, Rutgers, Washington, Oregon, Maryland, or Wisconsin. I could see a mix of 5 wins coming from those games. That doesn't count, by the way, the games at home you have against Penn State, Iowa, and Michigan. But that said, as you look at this schedule as a whole, this is absolutely brutal for Ohio State. The pros of the opponents that Ohio State will play in Big Ten play. Number one, you get Michigan State at home. Talking about how good Michigan State is at home in their own building. The last time Ohio State went to Michigan State in February of, I guess, this calendar year of 2026. That's a brutal task. So getting Michigan State at home, that really helps. Outside of that, you play, I'm looking at Bart Torvik here. Bart Torvik comes out with projections for next year. Something to take a look at. Probably not put all your weight into it. But Bart Torvik's worst projected team in the conference is Penn State. That is a Penn State team right now projected to be 151st in the nation. That is god-awful bad for a power conference team. Your next worst is pretty healthily inside the top 100 of Bart Torvik. It's Rutgers at 82nd. So the pro for Ohio State, you're playing most likely far and away the worst team in the Big Ten. You get to play them twice. The cons, unfortunately, there are a lot. You may like this as a fan. You may hate it as a fan. I don't necessarily dislike it, but this is just a fact, okay? You have to play the reigning national champions in Michigan, clear-cut Final Four contender, and you have to play them twice. You got to go get them at Ann Arbor. You got to bring them back into the shot. That's going to be a very, very tall task for this Jake Diebler-coached Ohio State team. And then from there, as we boil down, we see Ohio State's schedule is released. Is this good? Is it bad? Is it horrible for Ohio State? A lot of fans saying it's really, really bad for Ohio State. This is the rub with Ohio State's schedule, okay? You cut the Big Ten in half. You play the projected top 9 teams in the Big Ten. Can't include Ohio State, so it's kind of the top 8, really. But you play the top 9 teams in the Big Ten 9 times. You get Michigan twice. That's the only team you play twice. Outside of that, you get Michigan State at home. Of those 9 games, you take out Michigan at home, the time you play them twice. You take out Michigan State at home. Of those 9 games, 7 of those come on the road. You've got Illinois, Nebraska, UCLA, Indiana, Purdue, USC, Michigan, and Iowa. All of those teams projected to be in the top half of the Big Ten. You've got to play them all on the road except for Michigan and except for Iowa, where obviously you get to double up against them. So this is an incredibly tough schedule for Ohio State. It's an incredibly hard task to ask Ohio State to play this schedule. Someone's got to have the hardest schedule in the Big Ten this year. Ohio State is the team that has the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. And some would say it's not close. I would say at this point, it's clear cut that Ohio State does have the hardest schedule. Is that a bad thing? Is that me making excuses for Ohio State? I'm not going to say anything like that right now. But again, you play the projected top 9 times. 7 of those games are on the road. It doesn't get harder than that for the Ohio State University Buckeyes. The one thing that we can say, if you do take advantage and you do pick up some wins and you do stack some wins, this is going to be among the stronger resumes, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college basketball. Even if you finish 23-11, or something like that after the Big Ten tournament. Like you play those 32 games, maybe you finish 20-12. That 20-12 resume is going to be slotted a lot higher than all the 20-12 resumes because of how brutal this schedule is for Ohio State. So I do fully believe this is the hardest schedule for Ohio State. You can let me know in the comments. What do you think? Does Ohio State have the hardest schedule in the Big Ten, or am I overreacting here? Let me know. Would love to hear it. Thanks for being here, by the way. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you are there. That's the first topic of business we've got, but there's more. There's a whole lot more. Appreciate you being here today with me. There's more news, and this is one that I was waiting for, okay? This was a couple days, well, more than a couple days, but at least when I heard it, a couple days in the works at that point where it seemed like we were going down this path of Ohio State making a hire on its coaching staff to replace Joel Justus. And finally, Ohio State announces it. So actually, Ohio State still hasn't announced it yet. We had some members. I think you saw Adam Jardy. You saw whoever. I think Patrick Murphy of 247 Sports and myself, 11 Warriors, kind of got the green light to run with it. So I'll talk about it now. Ohio State has hired Mike Wells, a former assistant coach in the NBA, a former head coach in Australia basketball as well. Most recently, I have some very serious questions about the hire of Ohio State and Jake Diebler adding Mike Wells to the staff. But before we get into that, let's just talk about Mike Wells. So former Adelaide 36ers head coach, that's the Australian professional men's basketball team in the National Basketball League, fresh off making a championship appearance there. And it was seen as a surprise that he stepped down, according to an ESPN article. If you do some real research on this and you really dive into what happened here, there's not really a lot to it in terms of what happened, but there was some pretty serious shock and questions about why Mike Wells stepped down from this role. That said, this is a guy with 20 plus years of coaching experience in the NBA. He started his career with the Houston Rockets, and that's a really interesting story. So he actually wrote letters to every single NBA team. I don't remember where I saw this. He wrote letters to every single NBA team, basically saying, hey, I want to work for you. Worked out with the Houston Rockets. He started there as an intern. Then he joined the Lakers, Los Angeles Lakers, with Kobe Bryant. Jumped over to San Antonio, where he would win a title with Greg Popovich, of course. Spent a few years with the Spurs, while spending several seasons after that in the NBA, this time with the Washington Wizards. He then moved to college, where he helped George Mason and South Florida to 2 20-win seasons in 3 years there, combined across the 3 years there at George Mason and South Florida, before he hopped back into the NBA. That's where he spent a lot of time with the Utah Jazz. That's his last NBA experience. Actually, he had a year after Utah where he went to Charlotte, but spent 2014 to 2022 with the Utah Jazz. Kind of really helped rebuild the Jazz there on staff. Made the NBA playoffs several seasons. I think in the final 6 years that he was with Utah, the Jazz made the playoffs. Made a couple conference semifinals runs as well in the NBA with the Jazz before moving on to Charlotte and then Adelaide, the 36ers, where he saw a lot of success there as well. And then he's also been on staff with Team USA basketball. I think that's probably a really, really big deal, as well as a scout and an assistant coach. But all in all, the very clear connection here between Ohio State and Mike Wells. This is a Mount Vernon, Ohio native. I have some reaction here to this hire. Now, hands up, okay? The research that I've done, I haven't talked to anyone within the program about Mike Wells. I haven't spoken to Mike Wells at this point, but you just do the research when you find out Ohio State's going to make a hire. So I do have some takeaways on this. Remember, this is a replacement for Joel Justus, who left Ohio State a few weeks ago now at this point to go to Vanderbilt. This is a replacement. The coaching staff is now done. You've got Jake Diebler, head coach. By the way, Mike Wells hired as assistant coach. He's not filling the job title per se that Joel Justus had, which was associate head coach. So you've got Mike Wells, you've got Jamal Walker, kind of the defensive coordinator. I don't know if Mike Wells steps in as an offensive coordinator. I don't know an answer to that because that's what Joel Justus was. But you've got Wells, you've got Jamal Walker, Dave Dickerson, who does a lot of work with the bigs. Brian Walsh did a lot of guard development, and Luke Simons as well on staff. I don't know, at least from portal conversations, it sounds like most of the recruiting was done by some combination of obviously Jake Diebler, but also Brian Walsh and Luke Simons. I think Jamal Walker involved a little bit there as well. But sounds like a lot of the recruiting, at least to me, shouldering the load was Simons and Walsh, at least for players that were one, okay, for Ohio State. This is a very unique out-of-the-box addition for Jake Diebler, adding Wells to the staff. The NBA experience is incredibly valuable. There are things you learn there. There's no secret. There's no question about it. The best in the business in terms of coaching are in the NBA. That's not to say that there aren't some incredible, excellent, elite coaches in college basketball and overseas and things like that. But by and large, if you take a swath of the entire industry, the best coaching lives in the NBA. So the fact that you have a guy who's spent multiple decades in the NBA, sure, never as a head coach, but as an assistant coach on staff year over year and coaching with the likes of Greg Popovich, for example, with the Spurs for a long time. He spent part of his career there. So that's super, super valuable. I think maybe more valuable than anything is his time at Team USA as a scout and on staff there as an assistant coach. That's definitely exciting for Ohio State. I do have some questions though, okay? As we look at where Ohio State is heading, right? I think that the focus for Ohio State in terms of being competitive at this point is they want to be really, really strong in high school recruiting. And when they go out and get transfers, they want to get guys who can stay with Ohio State for multiple seasons. They want to build up towards what may be coming here, an impending ruling from the NCAA or executive orders or whatever the case may be across college sports and the landscape of college athletics overall. They want to be building a sustainable model where if there is a rule in place where you can transfer 1 year freely. And after that, if you do transfer, you got to sit out a year. If you're heading back in that direction, you want guys who are going to remain with the program for a while. That said, that's the approach Ohio State wants to take. As you look at the recruiting, though, specifically, you're going to have to be able to win in recruiting. And right now, you have lost Joel Justus, who, in my opinion, obviously one of the better recruiters in all of college basketball. From his time in Kentucky to Arizona State to Ohio State, the wins that he had, winning LJ Smith. By the way, he was a primary on Cam. Goodness, what's his name? Cam Mercer in the class of 2028. He's a primary there for Ohio State. Now, no primary there, or a new primary, I guess I should say, for Cam Mercer in the class of 2028. He's been really, really successful, great relationships, things like that. So the fact that you lose him, you got to replace someone who, in my opinion, has the recruiting chops. And you now are having a guy filling out the staff who, to me, the number one thing I would ask for in a replacement for Joel Justus, on-court stuff, yeah, sure. Player development, yeah, of course. You want all that, but you want recruiting. That's not something that Ohio State really has, is that elite level recruiter now with the loss of Joel Justus. Now, Jake Diebler would say that he is that, and I don't think you can argue against it necessarily, but it is something worth mentioning, is the fact that you have that huge hole on the coaching staff, and it did get filled by Mike Wells. In my opinion, I don't think it did. He spent 3 years in college. For the rest of that, really, his entire career has been in the NBA. It's been professional basketball. This is an area where the roster is kind of made for you. And as an assistant coach, especially, you've got to make relationships with guys who are going to be on the roster for 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And you've got to work to develop them. You've got to work to put a blend of good players together and go win with them. And it's much better, or much different, I should say, in college basketball, where you've got to establish relationships with sometimes 14, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, establish relationships with parents. Then you've got to work with agents and establish relationships there. And it's just a whole different world. And because of that, I think that this is a unique hire. It's kind of a wild card hire. I think it's going to be really, really good for Jake Diebler and Ohio State on the court. I question how this impacts Ohio State moving forward with recruiting. I would say, and I haven't spoken with anyone about this, so I don't know that this is accurate, but I would think that Jake Diebler probably thinks to himself, hey, I've been an incredible recruiter my entire career. I've won at Vandy. I've won at Ohio State in the recruiting world. That said, I think I can recruit at a high enough level that losing a Joel Justus and replacing it with a guy who's maybe not the strongest recruiter or just doesn't have the experience. It doesn't mean that Mike Wells can't be a great recruiter. It just means he doesn't have the experience right now. So if you don't have the experience right now, and maybe he will come in and maybe the plan is for him to be an excellent recruiter. If that's the case too, cool. Let's see it. But I would say if I'm Jake Diebler, I can handle it. I'm going to let Mike Wells kind of assist in terms of putting together whatever the case may be. Modern offense, shut down defense. We're going to blend everything together and maybe pull from the NBA and pull from Team USA and all the resources that Mike Wells has and the relationships and experience he has over several years. Maybe that's what the plan is. I don't know that that's the case, but it most certainly could be. So if that is the case with Mike Wells and all the successes that he's had, I'm good with it. I just wonder what recruiting is going to look like moving forward for Ohio State. So you can let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. Please like the video as well. Make sure you're subscribed as well. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Mike Wells hire. Unique for sure. We'll see where it goes from here. All right. Couple other just quick topics here that I'll get you because we got enough time. A couple other updates, okay, this week. Now we're getting into the part of the year where we're between the summer guest series. Make sure you're subscribed for that. But we're between that. So because we're between that and the transfer portal, there's just kind of nuggets and news, and that's what I'll give you on this show as well. A lot of people want recruiting coverage, so I give that to you, especially in the offseason. There's a new visitor heading to Columbus coming up here in June. It is Oneal Delancy, class of 2027 guard. He's a 4-star. He's the number 53 player overall in the class of 2027, according to 247 Sports. Number 45, according to On3. He's a top 10 shooting guard, stands at 6'2", at least according to whatever recruiting website I saw. Who knows how up to date that is? He will visit Ohio State on June 22nd. We'll also visit Houston and Florida on June 5th and June 10th, respectively. Look, for this one, Ohio State's going to go up against two of the top programs in all of college basketball. Florida won a national title 2 years ago, got tripped up by Iowa, obviously, last season. But who did Florida beat in the national title game 2 years ago? That was Houston. Houston seconds away, or just not letting a ball fall out of your hands. Potentially away from winning a national title was Houston 2 years ago. One of the winningest programs this decade is Houston, one of the most successful. So Jake Diebler, Ohio State going to have to get their money's worth here in the recruitment of Oneal Delancy. Ohio State on the flip side, by the way, just made the NCAA tournament for the first time in 4 years and was the first loser of the NCAA tournament, at least a field of 64. So two programs not necessarily going in opposite directions, but I think the arrow is slightly pointed up for Ohio State. For Houston and for Florida, it's a rocket ship at this point. Just two or three completely different programs, or two programs different from one, I guess is how we should say it. Previous visits for Delancy. Visited Ohio State and Florida in November of 2025. Last time I spoke to a source on this, Ohio State was among the top schools on Oneal Delancy's list. That was in November of last season, and that was right after the LJ Smith commitment. So I don't know if things have necessarily changed there all that much. I would say probably not, since he's going to take a visit to Ohio State. Since you still have a visit in place, I do think that obviously means something for the Buckeyes at this point. But keep an eye on Oneal Delancy taking a visit to Ohio State coming up here in June. That's something that you can get excited about. Ohio State still really trying to rally the troops and win in the high school recruiting rankings. That's where they've been good. You get LJ Smith committed. You've got Anthony Thompson now on campus for Ohio State here in a couple of weeks to join Ohio State basketball. That's good. They look to continue to win at this point. Okay. Only other thing that happened this week, we have a date for Ohio State and UConn playing. I don't remember the exact date. It is sometime in November. Let me see if I can try to pull it up really quickly here. Just going to try to get you some tidbits here. So the date is November 13th. I don't remember. Is that a Friday or a Saturday? Let's find out together. November 13th is a Friday. Ohio State will play on Friday. It's fine. I get that college football is king. I kind of like Saturday games better, but Ohio State will play UConn probably on Fox, let's face it. That game probably on Fox. That's the only thing to be aware of at this point. Okay, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Like the video on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. You know all that stuff. May have a guest for you coming in the next week or so. We will see about that. But we're at a point now where things are settling down. You're going to see things settle down. That's as specific as I can be. Ohio State will be on campus in June with its players. They'll begin workouts for the summer. So kind of similar to spring practice for football. That's what we place here in these first couple of weeks of June. So hopefully we'll get some intel on how things are looking at that point. Still waiting for Justin Pippen to be officially announced at Ohio State. I wouldn't be concerned about that, but just something to be aware of. And then we'll get into the summer guest series. Thanks so much for being here today. I shut up before you shut me off. Go Bucks.